So I want you to think about the word kingdom. Like when you hear that word, what immediately pops into your head?
I mean, for most of us, it's probably a map.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you picture a piece of parchment, maybe some, I don't know, some ancient looking font and a bold, thick line drawn across a landmass.
Yeah. The border is clearly defined.
Right. You just point to it and you say, there it is. That's the kingdom. Like the king rules inside that line and outside that line, he doesn't.
It's a very binary way of looking at the world, you know. You are either inside the geographic boundary,
Yeah.
subject to the laws and the taxation and all that, or you're outside of it.
Yeah.
It's comforting because it's clean, it's visible, and it's strictly categorized.
And this is the but when you take that mental map into the realm of theology, it just doesn't work.
Mm,
Specifically with the deep dive we are doing today into the concepts presented by Chris R. Villasis.
right, in his work on the expansion of God's kingdom.
Yes, exactly. Along with these three incredibly dense visual frameworks we have in front of us, when you apply that map analogy, that map becomes entirely useless.
Completely useless.
Yeah.
You try to lay that map over these ideas, and nothing lines up at all.
The borders just disappear. The whole concept gets completely inverted. And I feel like if you try to understand this kingdom using modern political definitions, you are going to end up in complete conceptual muddy waters.
Which is exactly why the author argues that the kingdom is arguably, you know, the most misunderstood reality in modern thought.
Oh, absolutely.
People are constantly trying to force a cosmic spiritual reality into into a legislative or geographic framework, and it just doesn't fit.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today for you. We're looking at this grand narrative of how this specific kingdom operates, like how it secretly expands, how it completely reorders human culture from the inside out.
Yeah, and why it is not a political regime or just some private warm feeling in your chest.
Right. And I want to tell you, whether you've spent decades studying theology or you are literally just bumping into these ideas for the first time right now, getting your head around this concept is massive. It takes all these seemingly disconnected pieces of life, you know, ancient history, personal ethics, global culture, even how you interact with your coworkers on a Tuesday, and it locks them into one cohesive puzzle.
It really does. But to get to that cohesive puzzle, though, we first have to sort of clear the brush.
Yeah, strip away the baggage.
Exactly. We just strip away the cultural baggage. And the sources we're analyzing tackle this immediately. They point out these two massive distortions that pull people in opposite directions when they try to define what the kingdom actually is.
The tug of war. I love this part. Let's
Yep.
get right into that. So the first distortion the author hits is what we can call the politicized kingdom.
Right.
This is the attempt to reduce the kingdom of God to earthly control. It's this assumption that, well, if the kingdom is real, it needs to be instituted via social engineering or civil power or legislative action.
And the author emphatically rejects that. Just full stop.
Yeah.
No nation, no political party, and no earthly regime can claim to embody this kingdom.
Mm.
When people politicize the concept, they are fundamentally misunderstanding the nature of the power at play here.
Wait, expand on that a bit. The nature of the power.
Yeah, so they want to use coercion, right?
Uh-huh.
Laws, force, earthly authority. They want to use that to manifest something that simply cannot be manufactured by human hands.
Hmm.
The kingdom is not human ambition baptized in religious language.
Wow. Okay, I was actually looking at this and thinking about how we interact with technology. This politicized kingdom distortion, it's like trying to force a massive revolutionary software update onto a piece of completely incompatible legacy hardware.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
And you're doing it by just like smashing the computer with a hammer.
Right.
You are trying to force a new operating system using brute physical force. It's never going to work. You're just going to break the machine.
Exactly. And then, on the absolute other side of the spectrum, you have the second distortion.
The privatized kingdom.
Yes. And this is the idea that the kingdom is strictly inward.
Right.
Like it's entirely future-oriented, or it's just a private feeling of inner peace. It's a meditation session in your living room that has absolutely zero significance for public life, economics, or culture.
Oh, man. So if we stick with the software analogy, the privatized kingdom is like downloading that massive revolutionary software update, but then just leaving it running silently in the background of your device.
Yeah, where it doesn't interact with any of your apps.
It doesn't change the interface and has absolutely no visible effect on how the device actually operates.
Exactly. Both of these extremes, the hammer and the hidden background process, They completely miss the reality.
Okay, so if it's not a government policy that you enforce with a hammer, and it's not a private feeling you keep to yourself in the background, how do these sources actually define it? Like, what are we talking about here, geographically or physically?
Well, the fundamental paradigm shift required here is understanding that the kingdom is not first a territory. It's not a place. It is defined as an action. It is the active reign of God in Christ breaking into the world.
An active reign.
Yes, it is a dynamic force. It is spiritual in its origin, meaning, it doesn't come from human legislation, but it is highly practical in its effects.
So it's more like a gravitational pull than a fenced-in yard.
That's a really good way to visualize it. It arrives in the person of the Messiah, it advances through the gospel, and it steadily exposes and displaces rival kingdoms.
It pushes them out.
Right. And there's a progression laid out in the material that anchors this perfectly. The author says, where this active reign is received, lives change.
And where lives change, families change.
Exactly. Where families change, communities begin to change. And where the gospel takes root deeply, cultures are never quite the same again.
It's a microscopic origin with a macroscopic outcome.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
It starts with the individual heart, but, and this is a massive distinction the author makes, it doesn't just change hearts, it changes what those hearts actually build.
Yeah, that phrase is the bridge between the internal and the external. If your core operating system is changed by this new reign, the way you construct your family, your business, your art, your legal systems, all of that is inevitably altered.
Because you're operating on different code.
Exactly. You cannot have a completely transformed internal reality that produces the exact same external societal structures. It's impossible.
Okay, so we've established the definition. It's an active, reigning force. But to really grasp how this force operates, we have to look at its origins. Where did this come from? Because the framework we are looking at makes it very clear this isn't some new philosophy that just popped up a couple of millennia ago.
Far from it. The visual timelines we are analyzing, they map out a grand narrative, and it starts long before human history.
It starts in eternity.
Right. The concept of this kingdom wasn't an emergency backup plan.
Oh, I love that point.
It wasn't God scrambling to put together a rescue mission after humanity made a mess of things. It was the divine intention before time even began.
It was the original blueprint.
Yeah. Yes. The analysis points to texts like Ephesians 1, noting that the intention to have a redeemed people living under this benevolent reign was the plan all along.
Oh, wait. Why does that matter, though?
What do you mean?
I mean, on a practical level, for the person listening to this right now trying to figure out their daily life, why does it matter if this kingdom was planned in eternity versus being a historical reaction? Like, what's the practical difference?
It matters because of stability.
Stability, okay.
Think about it. If the kingdom was just a reaction to human failure, then it's contingent on human behavior. It means its success or failure depends on cultural trends or political climates or institutional momentum.
It's reactive.
Right, it's reactive.
Yeah.
But because it originates in eternity, its expansion is anchored in an unchanging, unstoppable purpose. History isn't just a series of random, chaotic events tumbling forward into the dark. It is moving intentionally toward a divinely appointed end.
Man, that structural stability makes a lot of sense. So moving down this timeline, we go from eternity into creation. And this is where the framework gets into humanity's original job description. In Genesis 1, humanity is commissioned to, quote, fill the earth and subdue it. And the argument here is that this mandate was inherently kingdom-shaped.
It absolutely was.
Right.
Humans were designed to exercise dominion over the earth. But this is where we have to be very, very precise with our language.
Okay, lay it on us.
They were not made for autonomy. They were made for delegated rule.
Delegated rule.
Yes. They were created to act as stewards or mirrors, reflecting God's wise and benevolent reign out into the physical world.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, or at least poke at this tension.
Lay for it.
Because the word autonomy usually has a very positive connotation in our modern world.
Right.
It means growing up, being an adult, taking charge of your own life. We actively encourage autonomy, but in this theological framework, autonomy is framed as the root of rebellion.
It is.
Why is wanting to be autonomous considered a bad thing here? Doesn't delegated rule just sound like divine micromanagement, like you're just a middle manager with no real power?
It sounds like micromanagement. Only if you view God and humanity as competing powers fighting over the same pie.
Okay, that's a good point.
But the framework suggests a totally different dynamic. It's the mirror and the light source.
Explain that.
A mirror is incredibly effective. and fulfills its absolute purpose when it is angled toward a light source, reflecting that light into dark places. That's delegated rule. The mirror has immense influence. It lights up the room, but it isn't generating the light.
Oh, wow. And autonomy.
Autonomy is the mirror deciding it no longer wants to face the light source. It turns away and tries to generate its own light.
And what happens?
It just goes dark. The mirror's freedom to turn away actually destroys its ability to function.
That is profound.
In this narrative, human beings are designed to thrive, to build, and rule specifically by channeling the love, grace, and order of the Creator. When we sever that connection in pursuit of autonomy, we don't become gods. We just become broken mirrors.
Which brings us perfectly to the fall.
The moment the mirror turned away.
Exactly. The source material describes sin not just as breaking a list of arbitrary rules, like taking a cookie from the cookie jar. It describes it as a fundamental political and theological revolt.
It was a complete rejection of kingship.
Yeah. Genesis 3.5 is highlighted here. The serpent's bait was, "You will be like God."
Right. That wasn't an invitation to break a rule. It was an invitation to a coup.
A coup! Yes, it was humanity taking the bait to seize that autonomy, to establish self-rule and become the ultimate authority of their own lives.
And this births what the infographics label the counterfeit kingdoms or the rival kingdoms. And there's this brilliant contrast drawn here in the visuals. At the top of the true kingdom is God, but at the top of the rival kingdom is the self-king.
The self-king. And we need to trace the cascading effects of that self-king because, honestly, it explains so much of human history.
It really does. Because when you reject the true king who operates on love and grace, the counterfeit kingdom you build has to run on a different fuel.
And what is that fuel?
According to this framework, that fuel is fear and control.
Fear and control. Let's ground that for the listener. Because think about a workplace. You can have a team that operates on trust, mutual respect, and a shared vision, right?
Yeah, healthy environment.
Exactly. Or you can have a team run by a micromanager who uses intimidation, shifting expectations, and threats to get results. Both teams might produce a product, but the underlying operating system of the second team is fear and control.
And it's exhausting.
It's totally exhausting, it breeds paranoia, and it eventually just falls apart.
That is a perfect microcosm of what the text is describing on a macrocosmic scale. The counterfeit kingdoms still build things. Humanity didn't stop being productive after the fall.
Right, we built Babel.
We build empires, we build modern economies. But because the foundation is the self-king, that productivity is haunted.
The chart lays this out so starkly, like the true kingdom is marked by truth and light. The rival operates on deception and darkness.
The true brings life and abundance. The rival brings death and destruction.
The true fosters unity and reconciliation, and the rival breeds division and pride.
So human history basically becomes contested territory. The gospel doesn't just enter a neutral, blank slate world. It enters a world dominated by these counterfeit operating systems.
And God's response to this contested territory isn't to just wipe the board clean and start over.
Right, no flood 2.0.
Exactly. It's a slow, methodical reclamation project through the covenants. It starts with Abraham, with a promise that through him, all families of the earth will be blessed.
And then it narrows down to Israel at Mount Sinai. They are specifically called to be a, quote, kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
They were supposed to be the contrast society.
The repaired mirror, reflecting the true king to the surrounding nations.
But the material honestly notes that Israel repeatedly fails to sustain that. They succumb to the surrounding counterfeit kingdoms.
They want a king like the other nations. They want the fear and control model.
Yeah, so the promise narrows again, intensifying with the Davidic covenant. This is the promise of an everlasting throne for David's line.
So the Old Testament essentially becomes this agonizing, centuries-long anticipation of a true king who can actually fulfill the mandate without failing.
Which sets the stage for the redemption phase. Jesus arrives, and notice how he arrives. He doesn't show up acting like a philosopher delivering a new TED Talk on ethics.
Not at all. He arrives with explicit royal declarations.
The kingdom of God is at hand. Those are literally his opening words.
And his actions immediately back up that claim. The miracles Jesus performs are categorized in this framework as kingdom signs.
Okay, let's talk about that. Because usually people view the miracles as just raw proof of divinity. Like, look, I can walk on water, therefore you should listen to me.
Right, like parlor tricks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Magic tricks to prove a point. But the author frames them totally differently.
Because they aren't just parlor tricks to prove he has supernatural power. They are the undoing of the fall.
The undoing.
Yes. When Jesus opens blind eyes, cleanses lepers, expels demons, and raises the dead, he is physically pushing back the borders of the counterfeit kingdoms of darkness, disease, and death.
Oh, wow.
He is restoring creation to its original, intended state in miniature, one person at a time. It's the original operating system overriding the corrupted files.
That is so cool. And here is the massive turn in the story. Just as this king is gaining momentum, just as the kingdom signs are happening and people are gathering, we hit what the framework calls the ultimate paradox.
The cross.
The cross. If you are a first-century observer expecting a triumphant, sword-wielding king to finally crush the oppressive Roman Empire and establish a visible geopolitical reign, the crucifixion is completely incomprehensible.
It looks like total humiliating defeat.
Right. It looks like the counterfeit kingdom won, but it is the ultimate inversion of how we understand power. The text argues that Christ reigns by suffering. He conquers by being crucified.
And I really want us to slow down here and explain the mechanism of this.
Yes, please. Because how does dying conquer anything? In a literal, strategic sense, how does a crucifixion advance a kingdom?
To understand the mechanism, we have to look back at what powers the counterfeit kingdoms.
Okay.
We said earlier they run on fear, control, deception, and ultimately death. Their leverage over humanity is sin and guilt.
Leverage.
Yes. If you owe a massive debt to a corrupt system, that system owns you. It uses that debt to keep you in fear and bondage.
Right. They hold it over your head.
Exactly. The material points to passages like Colossians 2, which says Jesus disarmed the rulers and authorities on the cross. He didn't disarm them by fighting them with stronger swords.
Right.
He disarmed them by absorbing the penalty of sin. He canceled the debt.
Oh.
If the counterfeit kingdoms use guilt and the fear of death to control humanity, Christ's sacrificial death and subsequent resurrection bankrupt their power source.
Wow.
You can't threaten someone with death if their king has already conquered it. The leverage is gone.
He bankrupts the power source. That completely reframes the cross. It's not a tragic defeat. It's a tactical dismantling of the enemy's entire infrastructure.
Yes. And the resurrection is the vindication of that victory. The king is enthroned. The rescue mission was a success.
But this introduces the most practical, lived-in tension of the entire framework. And I know you, listening, feel this every single day. The king is on the throne, the victory is secured, but look out your window.
Exactly. Look at the news.
It doesn't look like a fully realized divine kingdom. There is still war, there is disease, there is immense suffering. So how does a kingdom established through a crucifixion actually take over this messy physical world?
This is where we transition into the stealthy expansion of the kingdom, the methodology of growth.
Okay.
And to explain this, the sources lean heavily on the parables of Jesus, specifically focusing on how the kingdom grows in hiddenness.
The parables. We have the seed growing secretly, the mustard seed, the leaven, the hidden treasure. Let's look at the leaven, because I think the analogy of yeast and dough perfectly captures what is happening here. It's the perfect analogy.
When you're baking bread and you add yeast to the dough, you don't get an immediate explosion.
No, there are no fireworks.
Right. It's a microscopic process. It's entirely invisible at first. But what the yeast is actually doing on a cellular level is consuming sugars and releasing gases.
It is fundamentally, structurally altering the dough from the inside out.
Yes, it's quiet, it's slow, but it is an unstoppable chemical reaction. You can't unleaven the dough once it's in there. Eventually, the entire composition of the bread is changed.
That is the exact mechanism the author is conveying for the kingdom's expansion. It spreads quietly, inexorably from the inside out. And it does this through what the text calls means, not magic.
Means, not magic. Which means we aren't waiting for spectacles in the sky. So what are the actual means?
The primary means listed are the Word of God, which proclaims the truth and calls for repentance.
Okay.
The Holy Spirit, who regenerates and empowers. And the Church, which acts as the witness community. I want to stop on the word regenerates for a second. That's a heavy theological term. What does that actually mean in a practical, psychological, or daily life sense?
Regeneration, in this context, means a rewiring of the core desires.
Rewiring.
Yeah, it is not just behavioral modification. Counterfeit kingdoms can force behavioral modification through fear and laws.
Right, like you won't steal if you think you'll go to jail, but you might still really want to steal.
Exactly. Regeneration is a change at the level of the want to. It's the new birth the text talks about. where the spirit actually changes a person's affections so they begin to love the things the king loves and hate the things the king hates.
It's the yeast changing the cellular structure of the dough.
Exactly.
And this hidden internal rewiring happening inside individuals brings us to a massive theological concept that explains the friction we feel in the world today, the tension of the already and not yet.
This is so crucial for making sense of our current reality. The framework asserts that the kingdom has definitively arrived in Christ. It is already here. But it has not fully consummated its reign over all creation. It is not yet complete.
We are living in the overlap of two ages. The old age of the counterfeit kingdoms is passing away, but it's still thrashing around.
It's definitely thrashed.
Yeah. And the new age of the true kingdom has broken in, but it hasn't fully taken over the surface yet.
This overlap is why believers experience profound paradoxes. They experience real transformation, real freedom from the dominion of those counterfeit kingdoms, yet they still get sick, they still face betrayal, they still encounter systemic evil.
Yeah.
The text uses the concept of exile to describe this state.
Exile, meaning you belong to a different homeland, but you are currently living under the occupation of rival powers.
Precisely. And how a person lives in that exile is how the kingdom grows.
Okay, unpack that. How does living in exile make it grow?
When individuals live according to the values of the true king, righteousness, peace, joy, truth, while residing in a world that operates on fear, control, and deception, they form what the author calls a contrast society.
A contrast society. Your very existence becomes a disruption to the status quo.
It really does.
Like if everyone at your company is backstabbing each other to climb the ladder, and you actively choose to elevate your peers and refuse to operate on fear, your behavior is jarring.
People don't know what to do with it.
Right. It contrasts so sharply with the environment that it acts as a visible sign of another rule.
But navigating this already and not yet tension is incredibly difficult. And the author warns against two major pitfalls that happen when we lose our balance here.
Yes, triumphalism and despair.
These are so common. Let's break them down. Triumphalism. This is when we forget the not yet.
Right.
Triumphalism expects total visible victory right now. It gets impatient with the slow, hidden growth of the yeast and decides to grab the hammer.
The political hammer we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It leads to using coercion, political power, or aggressive cultural warfare to force society to conform to kingdom ethics. It completely forgets the paradox of the cross and tries to establish the kingdom using the counterfeit kingdom's tools of control.
You can't force people to love the king at sword point. It just doesn't work. But then the other ditch you can fall into is despair, which forgets the already.
Right. Despair looks around at the slow growth, sees the overwhelming presence of evil, and assumes the kingdom isn't working.
It failed. We lost.
Yeah, it gives up, it retreats into isolation. But the framework reminds us that while the seed grows secretly, it is growing, and the final harvest is guaranteed.
So we have the seed planted, the yeast is in the dough, and we are holding this tension of the already and not yet. What happens next? Like, what does this chemical reaction actually look like when it hits human society at scale? How does this internal spiritual rewiring change the physical architecture of the world?
This is the ripple effect. The visual frameworks map out a very specific chain of transformation that moves from the absolute micro to the absolute macro.
The chain starts with the individual, as we discussed. That's the regeneration, the new birth, the new identity.
But it never stays private. A changed individual inevitably impacts the next link in the chain, the family.
Because you live with them.
Right. When the self-king is dethroned in a person, their home begins to be marked by love, forgiveness, and mutual service, rather than manipulation and ego.
And then multiple transformed families interconnect to form a community. The material notes that in this kind of community, neighbors are actively served, reconciliation is pursued, and justice isn't just a buzzword, it's a lived reality.
When communities shift, the momentum scales up to the level of culture. This includes ideas, art, work, economics, and governance.
And finally, the chain extends to nations, pointing toward a global, multi-ethnic worship of the true king.
Yeah.
I really want to spend some real time on that culture link, because the sources explicitly highlight specific spheres of society that are impacted. Let's pick two of them and look at the actual mechanics of how this works. Let's look at justice and work. How does the kingdom operating system change the sphere of justice? The outline says, righteousness protects the vulnerable, but what does that mean practically?
Let's use a real-world scenario. Imagine a business owner in a supply chain who discovers a legal loophole that allows them to pay their overseas workers significantly below a living wage.
Okay.
The counterfeit kingdom, driven by the self-king, says, take the loophole, maximize profit, consolidate your own power. That's the fear and control operating system at work.
Because if you don't take it, your competitors will, and you'll lose out.
Exactly. It's driven by fear.
Yeah.
But if that business owner has been regenerated, if they are operating as a citizen of the kingdom,
Then they evaluate that loophole through the lens of the true king's values. Righteousness and justice demand that the vulnerable are protected, not exploited.
yes. So the business owner chooses to take a financial hit to pay a fair wage.
And right there, the spiritual reality has altered the physical, economic reality of an entire community of workers across the world. The yeast has changed the dough of that specific supply chain. It's not just a nice thought, it's a tangible shift in how resources flow.
Exactly. And that naturally applies to the sphere of work, too. The material states that the kingdom brings excellence and integrity to daily labor.
It means your daily labor isn't just a grind to feed the self-king or build your own tiny empire. Whether you are coding software, teaching third graders, or repairing plumbing, you are exercising that original delegated rule we talked about from Genesis.
You are bringing order out of chaos and reflecting the goodness of the Creator.
But I know you always have pushback when we get to the sphere of arts and media.
Oh, I do, because this is where things often get incredibly muddy. The author states that the kingdom reforms culture but does not idolize culture.
Right.
He notes that this isn't a blanket affirmation of everything humans make. Some things are judged, others are purified.
So, practically speaking, how does someone living in this kingdom interact with arts and media? Because let's be honest, we've all seen the subpar, cringeworthy media that tries to slap a superficial Christian label on a secular piece of art, and it usually fails miserably as art.
Oh, it really does. It's a very tough line to walk. And the reason so much of that branded media fails is because it's trying to change the vocabulary without changing the values.
Explain that. What do you mean by vocabulary versus values?
Remember the contrast of values we looked at earlier. The true kingdom is marked by truth, light, and authenticity. The counterfeit kingdom is marked by deception and manipulation.
Okay.
If a filmmaker wants to make a movie that advances kingdom values, but they use manipulation, two-dimensional propaganda, and emotional coercion to force their point across, they are using the tools of the counterfeit kingdom to try and promote the true king.
Wow.
It's a contradiction in terms. It self-defeats.
So redoing the arts doesn't necessarily mean every character has to explicitly preach a sermon. It means the operating system of the story has to be true.
Yes. It means telling stories that deal honestly with the darkness of the world, but ultimately highlight truth and light as the superior reality.
Right.
It's about creating beauty that genuinely reflects the order and majesty of God, rather than glorifying nihilism or despair. It's about the integrity of the art itself, not just the label on the marketing materials.
That makes total sense. It's the difference between making a Christian spreadsheet, which means literally nothing, versus using a spreadsheet with absolute integrity to manage resources honestly, rather than using it to embezzle funds or deceive investors.
Exactly. The ethics of the kingdom invade the practical mechanics of the tool.
Which leads us directly into how you, the listener, are meant to participate in this. Because if this kingdom is touching everything from supply chain economics to filmmaking, how do we engage with it in our ordinary lives?
The material is so clear on this. Kingdom expansion is not restricted to professional clergy or full-time missionaries.
Thank goodness.
Right. Teachers, parents, civil servants, artists, and scientists are all actively living under this reign. Daily obedience is kingdom service.
When you forgive a coworker who threw you under the bus, instead of seeking vengeance, you are not just being a nice person. You are publicly demonstrating that you operate under a different king who canceled your massive debt, so you are canceling a smaller debt owed to you.
It is an act of allegiance.
The infographics actually break this daily participation down into 5 key practices for kingdom living. Let's unpack how these actually function as mechanisms of allegiance.
The first is pray. The text points to asking God to advance his reign on earth as it is in heaven.
Matthew 6.10.
Exactly. And this
Yeah.
isn't just reciting words. It is a posture of fundamental dependence. It's acknowledging that we cannot build the kingdom in our own strength.
Because we don't have the hammer.
Right, no hammer.
The second is believe. This is the daily active trust in the gospel, choosing to live under the king's authority rather than reverting to the self-king.
The third is belong. And this is vital. It says to grow in a gospel-centered community. You cannot survive exile alone.
No, it's too hard.
If you are trying to live as a contrast society of one, The gravitational pull of the counterfeit culture will eventually crush you. You need the community around you modeling the true values to keep you grounded.
That's so true. The fourth is serve. This is the outward motion, loving your neighbor, pursuing justice, binding up the broken.
And the fifth is share. Proclaiming the truth boldly. Pray, believe, belong, serve, share. These are the ordinary, unglamorous, everyday means by which the extraordinary expansion happens.
But as we look at this expansion, we have to address a very sobering reality check that the author includes, because this expansion does not result in universal approval. The essay has a significant section on judgment.
Judgment. It's a word that makes modern ears recoil.
Yeah, nobody likes that word. But how does it fit into this framework?
Well, the text asserts that the kingdom confronts and condemns false kingdoms. It judges every human structure, institution, or ideology that absolutizes itself against God.
Meaning, if a government, a corporation, or a cultural movement sets itself up as the ultimate authority, demanding the kind of total allegiance or worship that only belongs to the Creator the kingdom will stand in direct opposition to it.
Correct. The goal of this expansion is not to create a comfortable, human-made utopia where everyone just gets along and agrees on everything.
Right, because human utopias inevitably devolve into dystopias because they are built by the self-king.
Exactly. The goal of the kingdom is the vindication of God's righteous reign. The author clearly states that where the gospel is ultimately rejected, judgment remains. It keeps our perspective grounded.
Yeah, it reminds us we are participating in a rescue mission, but we are not the ultimate judges, nor are we capable of bringing heaven to earth through sheer willpower.
Which points us to the absolute end of the timeline, the final consummation.
Yes. We started in eternity, we moved through creation, the fall, redemption, and this long era of stealthy expansion. Now, the material points to the end, referencing texts like Revelation 21 and 22, the millennium, and the new creation.
The trajectory is certain. The kingdom that started as a hidden seed will ultimately be publicly manifest. The king will return, the enemies of life and truth will be fully subdued, and the redeemed people will be gathered in a renewed physical creation.
It's the total merger of heaven and earth. The not yet finally becomes the already.
It does.
But what I found most fascinating in this entire deep dive is how the author connects our present daily reality to that massive cosmic future. He writes, "The new creation is not a negation of kingdom expansion, but its consummation. The transformed lives and cultures of the present age are foretastes of the healed world to come."
A foretaste.
Yeah,
That is a profound concept.
I love that word.
It means that everything you were doing right now under the authority of the true king, the justice you fight for in your community, the beauty you capture in a piece of art, the radical forgiveness you offer to a family member, none of it is wasted.
It doesn't just evaporate when the end comes.
No, it is a small, tangible preview, a down payment of the eternal reality.
It's like bringing a single appetizer out from the kitchen to show the guests what the grand banquet is going to taste like.
Exactly. The earth will ultimately be filled with a knowledge of the glory of the Lord, and our daily obedience right now gives the world a glimpse of what that glory looks like.
Wow. Okay, let's pull back and look at the massive journey we've just taken through these sources. We started by discarding the maps.
Right, getting rid of the borders.
We stripped away the distortions, realizing the kingdom isn't a political hammer we swing, nor is it a private app running silently in the background of our minds. We learned it is the active, dynamic, world-altering reign of God.
And we traced its cosmic origins from an eternal blueprint through a creation mandate where humanity was designed for delegated rule acting as mirrors reflecting divine light, into a tragic rebellion where we sought autonomy and birthed counterfeit kingdoms built on fear and control.
We saw God's relentless reclamation project through the covenants, culminating in the most stunning paradox in history, a rescue mission where the king conquered the powers of death and fear, not by wielding a sword, but by absorbing their lethal leverage on a cross.
We explored how this inaugurated kingdom expands invisibly, utilizing the slow chemical reaction of yeast in dough. We discussed the tension of living in the already and not yet, avoiding the ditches of triumphalism and despair while operating as a contrast society in exile.
And we examined the ripple effect, how that quiet, internal rewiring of regeneration scales up to transform individuals, families, communities, and massive cultural spheres, fundamentally altering the operating systems of work, justice, and art.
It is a breathtaking narrative that redefines how we view human history and our place within it.
It really is. And it leaves me with one final lingering thought for you, the listener, as we wrap this up. It circles back to something we touched on early in our conversation.
About what hearts build.
Yes. The author argues that the kingdom changes hearts, yes. But more importantly, for the physical world, it changes what hearts build. He suggests that our earthly culture and the things we create with our hands and minds are a foretaste of that eternal, healed world.
What hearts build. It is the ultimate diagnostic question for our daily lives.
If that is true, I want you to take a hard look at your own life today. Look at the spreadsheets you are making. Look at the code you are writing, the way you speak to your children, the way you decorate your home, the business deals you negotiate, or the art you consume. What does the architectural or cultural footprint of your daily work look like right now? And if a total stranger were to forensically examine what you are building today, which of the two rival kingdoms would they assume you are working for?
Are you building with materials of truth, light, and grace? Or are you operating on the counterfeit fuel of fear, control, and self? It's a profound, challenging question to carry with you into your week.
It completely reframes Tuesday morning at the office, doesn't it? Thank you for joining us on this expansive deep dive into these sources. We hope it gave you a new lens, challenged your assumptions, and helped you see the world through a cohesive, cosmic perspective. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning. We'll see you on the next deep dive.